everyone. I'm Dave Parker with Virginia Found. We are in Winchester, tucked in the top tip of Virginia in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. Winchester is a relatively small community, about 28,000 people. Best known for Shenandoah University, the huge Apple Blossom Festival. There's a lot of history here. George Washington, the Civil War, so much more. If you're going to be visiting Winchester, you will likely find yourselves in Old Town Winchester, which we'll talk about quite a bit more. But we're also going to explore to the west and south of town. Virginia Found is in Winchester. Our trip to Winchester starts on this modest neighborhood street. It's where you'll find the most popular house in town, the Patsy Cline Historic House. Patsy was born in Winchester and lived in this house from 1948 to 1953. I love Patsy Cline, by the way. I could listen to her voice all day. As a testament to how important Patsy was to music, the house is now a National Historic Landmark. The curators have done a great job of not just paying tribute to Patsy, but in giving you a snapshot in frozen time of when she was here. It's a great walk down the memory lane of a house in the time period, even down to the cigarettes Patsy enjoyed, with accompanying lipstick. Among many other things, you can see one of her signature outfits and even the sketches of its design. Upstairs is where you'll find the family bedrooms. One of the interesting things you'll find in the Patsy Cline house is upstairs in one of the bedrooms is a display case. And in the bottom of that display case is the camera that took the last known picture of Patsy Cline 2 days before she died, which was March 5th, 1963. And that's the picture. Back down in the kitchen is where you'll find a small gift shop where you can leave with something other than just memories. You can even sit out in the backyard while humming Crazy or I Fall to Pieces and think about what could have been if her life hadn't been cut tragically short at the age of 30. Chances are, if you're visiting Winchester, you're going to find yourself in Old Town Winchester. This is where most of the bars and restaurants are, a lot of shops. It's a fun place to be. A little walking around, a little shopping makes a man hungry. One of the restaurants that several locals told me to try in Old Town was Thai Winchester. Try to get a seat outside so you can fully enjoy the feel of Old Town during your meal. A meal I let the waiter pick. Hey, just a reminder that when you're traveling, it's okay to ask as many questions as possible. So I asked them what their most popular dish here is at Thai Winchester, and they said it was their pad thai. Comes with shrimp. And now I know where the locals absolutely love this place. It's delicious.
Stand up for me, because when you stand up, your feet actually go farther out when you're standing. So that he's measuring about right at a 10, so 10 and a half, I would say.
A shoe store doesn't usually make a travel show, but most of the places you visit don't have a shoe store like Wilkins Shoe Center in Old Town. Putting people in the right pair of shoes since 1947, their slogan is that they sit and fit. And I'm sure you've noticed that not a lot of shoe stores do that anymore. Now, there's nothing magical about Wilkins. It is a shoe store, of course, but it's reassuring to find a place where the people who are helping you know what they're talking about, and they invest some of your shoe money right back in the community. But for a shoe store, it is a fun place to walk through. And hey, we all need a pair of well-fitting shoes, right? While we're on the topic of places most people don't flock to while traveling, it's not often when you go to a new town and everybody says, you need to visit the library, but every town doesn't have the Handley Library. This is a must-see for you. The Handley Regional Library is actually in the top 10 on TripAdvisor of things to do in Winchester. Even the front door system lets you know this isn't your typical public library. Built in the early 1900s, it represents the French Beaux-Arts style of architecture, which is a little different than the federal style you'll find throughout town. And yes, before we forget, they do have books here too. Maybe a good one on architecture while you're in town. A lot of rain on the lens here. I'm here with Mike with Appalachian Off-Road Adventures. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good morning. How are you?
So what are we going to do today?
Today we're going to go out and hit the trails. We're going to climb some mountain ridges, go down some really steep hills, run through some deep mud. If we manage to stay clean, it's because we didn't have fun.
Right.
The main goal today is to get ourselves outdoors, to get out in the middle of nature and kind of show off what these Jeeps can do with anybody driving.
This is Appalachian Off-Road Adventure. You'll find them 12 miles west of Winchester in Gore, Virginia at the Cove Campground. Even socked in with clouds and rain, it's beautiful here. Your toy for the day, or half day, is one of these 4x4 Jeeps. They're built for what we're about to do, but this is an indication of what awaits. For people who have never done this before, once they get back, what do they typically say?
First thing we always hear is wow. We never had any idea what this was going to do and how much fun they actually have all day.
Let's go say wow. Mike, or one of the other guides, can start off driving if you like, because this is not normal driving. It can be more like controlled sliding, bouncing, and leaning.
So all in all, there's about 40 miles worth of trails, ranging from the most easiest trail being like a camp road with no real obstacles to some of the craziest trails on the East Coast with boulders bigger than a Jeep.
If you're new to off-roading, you'll start off on a relatively easy, flat trail. You quickly learn that speed is not the goal. Slow and steady gets you over and through the obstacles. Also, know how the TV meteorologist always tells you to not drive through flooded roads? This is one of the few times it's okay to do the opposite. All right, so this is called the twist, right?
Yes, sir. Level 3, we're coming down.
After watching and listening to Mike, it was time to get behind the wheel for some of the most fun I've had driving since I started driving. If the metric for a successful day of off-roading looks like this, mission accomplished. I love doing this, and with it just being a short drive from Winchester, Appalachian Off-Road Adventure is a great adrenaline addition to your visit. So I was on my way back to Winchester on the Northwestern Pike after leaving Gore in that off-road vehicle adventure, and I saw this restaurant, the Hayfield Family Restaurant. Went in, had a bite to eat. There's nothing fancy, but great servings, great price, and delicious pie. Check it out. Let's hear the horns! I had mentioned before that I'm a big advocate of asking a lot of questions while traveling. One of the answers led me here. The Family Drive-In Theater in Stevens City, just 10 minutes south of Winchester. It opened in 1956, which meant people were watching The Ten Commandments and Love Me Tender in cars that look like these. There are 2 separate screens and a sizable snack shack in the middle of the property. It's hard to see, but even on a slightly misty night, the place was packed. This whole thing is super cool. I mean, when's the last time you went to a drive-in movie theater? There's a great crowd here tonight. Families have set up their chairs outside the vehicles. The way the sound works is the outside speaker, who knows how old they are, that still works great. Or you can pipe the sound directly into your car through a radio station that's synced up with the screen. In terms of the food, well, the hamburger is, well, it's a drive-in movie theater hamburger, but of course the popcorn is popcorn. Totally digging the Family Drive-In here in Stevens City. The second half of that night's double feature was Bedtime for Dave. While there are some highly recommended bed and breakfasts in Winchester, The signature hotel is the historic George Washington in downtown. Built in 1924, restored in 2008. It's one of those great hotels in Virginia that offer you history and the present. The hotel is named after George Washington for a reason. He first came to this area in 1748 to begin a career as a surveyor. He purchased property here a few years later. An office used by Washington is downtown and is open for tours. Interesting factoid or cocktail trivia for you. George Washington was elected as a representative to the Virginia House of Burgesses, but historians can only find one piece of legislation that he sponsored. Dates back to 1761, and that prevented hogs from running wild in the streets of Winchester so that they wouldn't contaminate the drinking water. Winchester's importance in our nation's history extends well beyond a Washington footnote on safe drinking water. As the Civil War raged across Virginia, Winchester became a focal point in strategy and battles. One of the key players was Confederate General Stonewall Jackson. In the middle of a Winchester neighborhood is the house he used as his headquarters from late 1861 to early 1862. The house is open to the public for tours, and it's where I met one of the area's writers and an overall Stonewall Jackson history buff. So I'm here with Mike Robinson. He writes Winchester Tales. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great. Thanks for meeting me here. We are here at Stonewall Jackson's headquarters. When you visit Winchester, it's almost impossible to visit here and not notice all of the history that is around us when it comes to the Civil War. Why was Winchester so important during the war?
Well, location, railroads, but the problem with Winchester and the surrounding area was so many roads in and out, but so many hills around the city. It was hard to keep Winchester and hold it. So that's why over a period of 5 years, we probably changed hands more than 70 times.
Wow.
And sometimes 2 or 3 times in a day.
Visitors will come away with different views about the history of the house, but there's an unlikely story here involving, of all people, actress Mary Tyler Moore, whose great-grandfather once owned the house.
Once she learned about her history, she came here. Now, back in the 60s, when a man was taking the plaster off of these walls, he found the original wallpaper, which we'll show you. Here, we have the original. So in the 80s, when Mary Tyler Moore came, she said, what can I do to help you guys? And they said, well, we're trying to replicate the wallpaper and put it up. And she said, I'm in. So she paid for the paper to be replicated and hung, and the paper that you see here is the paper exactly that Stonewall Jackson, sitting at the desk here, wrote to his wife, Mary Anna Jackson, and told her in that letter how beautiful this gilt paper was. So
that's a fantastic story.
It's tangible history. I love it. So.
For some, being in a historic location helps to bring history alive.
For miles.
Such is the case with Mike.
This is pretty cool. So come on up here, and I want to show you. This is the front of the Lewis Tillman Moore House of Jackson's headquarters. So back in 1861, when Jackson came here in November, what you see before you wasn't here. This was 5.5 acres, a beautiful little estate, but they called it Alta Vista because when you stood on this vantage point and looked down over the city of Winchester, you could see for miles and miles. It was a beautiful view, and he actually mentions that to his wife. When she comes here in December of 1861, she no doubtedly stood on this porch with him and looked out over the city of Winchester. It's pretty cool.
On a damp, cool October morning, I was reminded of the gift of good timing when traveling. I learned that the National Sheepdog Finals just happened to be nearby. They were taking place on the sprawling bucolic farm in Middletown. It's about 20 minutes from Winchester. Belgrove Plantation is normally a site of interest all its own, but people from around the country were here to see these dogs. Okay, go! You've no doubt heard the phrase, let nature take its course. For these dog handlers, sometimes it's hard to let the dogs run the course. So what's the hardest part of training these amazing dogs?
So for me, it's always that I don't actually know as much as my dog knows. And so being able to trust my dog's instinct, when you're looking at a course and you've got something panels 200 yards away, your dog sees that line and they're going to keep the pressure on the sheep correctly. And so many times we think we know better and we give them a command and then they push the sheep offline. So really being able to take a second and say, does my dog actually have this? Or do I need to step in? Has been the hardest part for me.
Now, for someone like me who has only seen the movie Babe, the intricacies of sheep herding a little bit lost on me, but generally this is how it works. There are two separate groups of sheep out there. The sheepdogs, or border collies, they go out, they get the groups separately, bring them back then together towards the owner who is standing out by a post whistling the calls, which is amazing to watch. Then the dog has to separate the 5 collared sheep from the other sheep, and then they have to get the 5 collared sheep in the pen, close the gate. They have 30 minutes to do it. The entire thing is fascinating to watch. Most of the contestants I saw on this final day of competition were not able to finish in the 30-minute time limit. But given that the sheep aren't there to let the dogs pull the wool over their eyes, sometimes you're just happy for what does go right. So how did Crow do today?
Crow did great for Crow. He got the turn back, which was my main goal with him, was to turn back and get the second packet of sheep. And he did that, and he sort of ran out of brain cells in the shed ring, so we didn't finish, but I was thrilled with him. He had a 2-day long trip out here from Colorado, so this was a big deal for him, to put everything together. So this was great. I was really happy with him at finals this year.
The sheepdog finals are held in different states each year, but this was a reminder that sometimes the surprises in traveling are more enjoyable or memorable than what you had planned. While we're in Middletown, it's important to note this is where you'll also find the Wayside Inn Bed and Breakfast, advertised as America's oldest motor inn. Their restaurant has great reviews. There are also more Civil War markers here and ghost tours. Middletown also has Schaefer's Barbecue. Not only is it in a converted gas station, it sits on the edge of a field where they have Civil War reenactments. Schaefer's isn't just a restaurant. It's a market that offers a bit of a homey, historic experience. They even have a payphone to prove the point. Pickled eggs, candies, birdseed wreaths, locally made syrup and honey. Oh, and a beer selection that invites you to sit and visit for a while. But I was here for the barbecue. The smoker is out front, where the gas pumps used to be. If you haven't seen this process in action, it's a lot of work and takes a lot of tending to, and it pays off. Here with Matt Schaefer, the namesake of Schaefer's Barbecue here in Middletown. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Love being covered in this smoke. It's the best smoke ever.
Yeah, if you just get into a cologne, we'll be in good shape.
That's right. What is your key to a good barbecue?
I think a good barbecue starts with just really caring about cooking barbecue.
Okay.
It takes a long time. You obviously have to have a good product to start with, and you've got to have wood, to cook with. But then it's just really caring, because it takes 6-8 hours to do a good job with the pork butt. So,
Bathing in hickory and meat smoke will make one salivate. Looking at this also will. 1/3 pound of barbecue with potato salad and cheesy macaroni as the sides. It is a barbecue sandwich like this, which is why food needs to be shown and not just talked about. Look at the size of this. This is 1/3 pound of barbecue. The sides are each 6 inches. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to put on the Schaefer's Big Julie's Bold and Sassy. Woohoo! It's got a little saw on the top. Here we go. Man, falling out. My key for barbecue is that it's not dry. And there's not a hint of dryness in this. I love this sauce. Man. And guaranteed you will leave Schaefer's not hungry. From a barbecue restaurant in a converted gas station to a winery in a converted house. This is Valerie Hill Vineyard and Winery in Stevens City, just 10 to 15 minutes south from downtown Winchester. It literally is like a house inside, which is something different from so many of the other wineries you may have visited in Virginia. But most houses don't offer flights of wine. By the way, how many times do you think he's described the wine to guests?
25 Cab Sauv, incredible dried currant, slight spiced cherry or almost strawberry tones in the front, heavy gravel-like minerality getting closer to your finish.
Their knowledge is always impressive to me. I don't think I had ever been to a winery by myself. Maybe not a good habit, but it was nice for this day. And the wine? Well, it went from this to this. Being outside of town, Valerie Hill has a great outside area. Hopefully you can stop by and enjoy the vines and views. The winery was on the way to Front Royal, another 15 to 20 minutes south. Much of northern Virginia is considered horse country. The rolling hills and valleys offer great riding, which is what you'll find at Royal Horseshoe Farm. Hey, buddy. Chief was my ride for the day. After the saddle was set for my height and some helpful hints, we were off. About a third of the guests here have no riding experience, so no reason to not give this a try. I was really looking forward to this, given how much time so many of us spend in front of computers and being bombarded with mechanical sound. One of the things I love about this is that for those of you who spend a lot of your days listening to the sound of an internal combustion engine, there is none of that out here. It's whisper quiet, with the exception of the birds. Good job, man. That was fun. Thank you, Chief. Hey, man, thanks to Charles and the rest of the crew here at the Royal Horseshoe Farm. Charles, I had a great time.
Well, thank you for coming. We
That was a
enjoyed
lot
the
of
ride.
fun. Thank you. Our last stop is at a place I originally thought would only be a mention. Turns out it was one of my favorite things in Winchester. The Museum of the Shenandoah Valley's mission is to preserve and enrich the cultural life and heritage of the Shenandoah Valley. The building, that is the museum, is the anchor to what is the largest green space in Winchester, over 200 acres. Before I got to town, I was told that I needed to stop by and see the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley. And I thought, okay, well, it's a museum. I'm sure it's interesting. I'll learn something. I had no idea. Now, I'm here on a Monday. The museum part was closed, but the grounds around it are unbelievable. I mean, spectacular. I don't know that I've seen anything like this in the state of Virginia. I mean, it really is beautiful. Well, I had a great time in and all around Winchester. So much history, great food, adventure, and it was a reminder to get out and explore a little bit. Try not to get locked into doing just that one thing. I find traveling is a little more fun that way. I'm Dave Parker with Virginia Found.